Today, I found 4 more obscure, hidden, strange, unique, and mostly dead MMOs. In most of these games I'm about to show you, I am one of, if not the only player, online in the entire world. What does a massively multiplayer game look and feel like when it's not massively multiplayer? Well, today we're gonna delve into these games, explore, and get a feel for what it's all about. We can speculate on why the game doesn't seem to have any players, but most of all, I want to find a diamond in the rough. I want to find something decent. Also, really quick, I just wanted to mention that today's video is once again sponsored by War Thunder, but we'll get into more on that later. So first up for today, we have something super unique, something you've probably never even heard of before, an anime MMORPG. I'm kidding, of course, but Aero Tale is an online free-to-play MMO featuring PvP and PvE. It was released in August of 2022, and it has over 800 mixed reviews on Steam. The trailer looks half interesting, the screenshots don't seem awful, and honestly, a lot more of the recent reviews were actually quite positive. Alright, let's check it out. You're immediately greeted with some less than modestly dressed anime women while the game downloads some extra files. After choosing a server and creating an account, I was finally able to start a character. You're met with this badass cutscene, and the first option you have to make is to choose between a hero and a villain. I just recently reviewed City of Heroes, so I felt pretty familiar with this narrative option. But I have no idea how it's going to play out in an anime MMO. I'm assuming my character isn't going to be a superhero. Either way, I chose villain, and here's where you can actually customize your character further, at least their gender, class, hairstyle, etc. Unfortunately for Aero Tale, it only features 3 classes, the warrior, the archer, and the wizard. So I chose warrior and decided to pick a hairstyle. Interestingly, it seems because your character is in an action shot of sorts, they forgot to turn off the motion blur, as the bottom and the top of your character is still somewhat blurry compared to the center of their chest. It's like that tilt shift effect that makes things look small when they blur the top and the bottom of a photograph. It does seem a little counterintuitive to blur out parts of your character's appearance that you're currently trying to customize, but hey, who am I to judge? After finding a suitably emo appearance that my 14-year-old self would be quite proud of, I named myself Waydot, and I was met with the same trailer that we actually saw in the Steam store. I pressed skip and was met with this loading screen, which looks like a banner ad for MapleStory that you would have seen on top of your web page while playing 8-Ball Pool. And finally, I was placed into the game, immediately greeted by an advertisement to check out all of the new, hot items on sale. But the interface actually looked pretty standard, all things considered. An action bar at the bottom, a minimap, a nameplate, quest guide, etc. There was a ton of menu items in the bottom right corner, which probably could have been placed into a drop-down menu, but otherwise it doesn't actually look too bad. What does look quite bad, however, is the font. I don't know how the user interface can look this modern, but they use a font for player and NPC names that look like something printed in the local newspaper in the 1950s. Now, the music isn't great, but it's not the worst thing I've ever heard. Unlike when my character swings his sword, that is. Am I gonna have to listen to this every time I fight anything? I'm getting the feeling we're in for a bit of a treat with this one. Anyways, I talked to Coach Rohan and yep, we're in for a treat indeed. Now, I was told to fight some bouncing pairs, and it appears this pink blob in front of me is sort of my guide. It's basically Paimon from Genshin, Navi from Zelda, the Black Spirit from BDO, also while being Kirby from Kirby. Combat is basically what you would expect. You kind of aim your character, as there doesn't really seem to be a targeting system, and then you press 1, which swings your sword. I basically two-shot these pairs, which would be pretty unfortunate in Fruit Ninja, but in an MMO, I'm not complaining. And immediately after, I already got my first level. Not bad. The game prompted me to apply some skill points to different attributes, of which there are 4. Strength, dexterity, intelligence, and agility. Next, the game told me that I could basically switch to an action combat sort of control system by pressing Alt. And in this combat mode, instead of using my number 1 ability, I could just click to swing my sword. This is actually kind of crazy. I've never played a game before that switches between ability bar sort of targeting to straight up action combat, and allows you to switch between them whenever you please. It's like everything about this game has been copy and pasted from other games, but in this particular scenario, they couldn't decide if they wanted to copy WoW's combat system or BDO. and instead they were like, let's just copy both of them. Anyways, after running for quite a long time, actually, it's interesting how far away this NPC I'm supposed to talk to is. And no, seriously, how long have I been running for? Well, I finally made it to the end of this road of pears. Guard Maynard had a difficult click box, but it was so worth it just to hear his voice line.
War demands discipline.
And afterwards, I was told to go through the portal ahead to Honam Kingdom, which must be some sort of player hub or main city because, honestly, I did not expect this game to be so highly populated. Are you kidding me? This many people are actually playing Aero Tales. Okay, listen, I've played my fair share of these dead MMOs at this point, and I've played many that are about 10 times the quality in terms of feel, gameplay, visuals, audio design, and in most of those games, I am literally the only person online on any of their servers. Yet somehow, Aero Tales has a bustling city hub? Are these even real players? I'm actually floored. It looks like my whole title was just a lie at this point, but genuinely, I was surprised to see this. Anyways, I continued following my Kirby's erratic movements as he, or she, introduced me to lots of the useful NPCs in the area, which I thoroughly enjoyed listening to their voice lines. This one here even kind of sounded like Herbert from Family Guy.
Everything has a price.
And I finally made my way outside into the Happy Plains. Here I completed some quests for some NPCs, which had me killing more pears, collecting honey from bees. And at this point I was level 5 and kind of wondering why I hadn't learned any new abilities at this point. That's when I realized I actually had a skills button in my menu, so I clicked on that and I was able to learn the air cut ability, which was actually kinda OP. It charged up an attack facing a direction and would basically attack any and all mobs in that direction. I handed in the quest and got to level 6 before being told to fight a bunch of wolves. I handed that in and got to level 7 before a giant dungeon flew out of the sky and with a giant explosion landed right beside me. Okay, sweet. Most MMOs have you going to the dungeon, but in Aero Tales, the dungeon comes to you. Anyway, inside the Temple of Lunar, I fought my way through a battalion of lunar wizards, and made my way towards the boss room at the end, where I received this super dramatic warning before facing off against one of the orcs from Warcraft 3. Now, this is where the jankiness of the combat really started to shine, because even though it was quite apparent when my character was doing damage to the boss, I couldn't always tell when my character was actually getting hit. This was actually a fairly difficult battle, and I had to spam through some of my health potions, which I had just conveniently found in my inventory prior to this boss fight. Kirby was also no help, but we eventually got him down, which featured this cool slow motion for a second to really acknowledge how badass you are. And then afterwards you get rated out of 3 stars depending on how fast you cleared the dungeon. Anyways, I played for a little while longer exploring this strange anime MMO. I found a place called Tonka Castle, which my 3-year-old son would have been overjoyed to hear about. And eventually I took a look at the in-game shop. And I want to applaud them for actually using the direct prices instead of some form of arbitrary currency that tries to obfuscate how much the items cost, but I couldn't get over the fact that everything ended in 0.999 cents. Like, is $14.99 not specific enough? Are the creators annoyed that by using the 0.99 sales tactic, they're essentially missing out on 1 penny for every transaction? So they had to make it super precise? 14.999 is 1/1000th of a penny off of $15. So in order to lose the same 1 cent they were losing on every transaction prior, it would now take 1,000 transactions to lose that same penny. I can't tell if this is pedantic, bad translation, or genius. Anyway, after talking to Munzo over and over again to try and simulate what it's actually like to have friends.
Hey, what's up? Hey, what's up? Hey, what's up?
I think I've seen enough of Aero Tale personally. This is a copy-paste of every Asian-made RPG and MMO in the past 20 years that I'm pretty sure was half created by AI. The combat is pretty whatever, which is usually the selling point for some of these games, despite the rest of the game being an absolute dumpster fire. But not so much in this case. The fact that this game has somewhat of a player base concerns me for those individuals. I'm sorry, but there are just so many better and free games to play. But hey, to each their own. I'm gonna go ahead and rate Aero Tales a D. A D+, because the voice lines were hilarious. As mentioned, today's video is sponsored again by War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. now available for free on PC and consoles. Take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships ranging from the 1920s to the fighter jets and main battle tanks of today. Deep dive into the fast-paced combat of War Thunder, where amazingly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics, and authentic sound effects place you right in the driver's seat of the most powerful war machines of our time. Join a massive community of over 70 million players in intense PvP battles. There is simply no reason not to, because there's no better game suited for fans of military history. So play War Thunder now for free on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. Use my link in the pinned comment or the video description to sign up. New players and those who haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack. That includes multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive vehicle decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium account. Available for a limited time only, so don't miss it. Alright, next up we have one that I actually didn't need to research at all, because one of you kind commenters actually recommended it for me. Villagers and Heroes, an old indie MMO. It's over a decade old, and it's actually not featured on Steam, so I had to find the game's website in order to check it out. It's definitely pretty obscure, despite its claims to be the world's largest cross-platform MMO. I think old school RuneScape would like a word. But the official Reddit only has 1.7k followers, and one person online, which is probably me. With that being said, the game was released in 2011, so perhaps once upon a time, it actually was the largest mobile MMO. The screenshots on the website looked half decent, and the very best part is that they took a bunch of random Google Play reviews and styled them as if PC Gamer or some other reputable source had actually said something positive about the game. But no, these are just random Google Play Store users. That's bold. So hopping into character customization, you're immediately met with some voice acting, and it's not even half bad.
Word of the grand festival has no doubt reached your ears.
You can choose your gender, height, and personality. I chose glamorous because just look at that attitude. Afterwards, you pick an origin place, which grants you different bonuses to professions. For example, being in the snowy, mountainous region seems to give you some sort of passive benefit to mining. A few more customization options later, you can make your character look very gaunt. Is that the word? Rolls off the tongue weird, but either way, we donned a mohawk, colored everything Waydot orange, and eventually I was able to choose my class, of which there are 5 options: warrior, wizard, hunter, priest, and shaman. I'm not gonna lie, at this point I was already getting World of Warcraft vibes, and because I generally main a mage, I decided to choose the wizard. It seemed my impression about WoW was correct, because afterwards you could actually choose your spec: fire or frost. I chose frost. And at this point, you can actually already pick your profession. There are 4 gathering and 4 crafting skills, and you can pick 3 options. I figured my character would be wearing generally cloth gear, so I chose plant lore, tailoring, and then cooking for good measure. And finally, after, you're actually able to choose a house for your character. There's 8 different options. I'm assuming later on you'll be able to visit this house in some sort of player-owned housing instance, but it's pretty unique that you actually get all of these options from spec to profession to housing straight in the character customization. I thought it was actually kinda cool. I chose the spooky looking house because it's damn near Halloween, and finally made it into the game. So after a quick loading screen, I was introduced to not Elwyn Forest, but Eldevin Forest. That feels like it might be a little on the nose. Am I about to play a mobile version of classic WoW? That's what it feels like. But the interface is quite nice, a minimap in the top right, nameplate and menus in the top left, and an action bar featuring a Diablo-style health and mana pool. I have a single spell, Ice Javelin, which will damage and slow enemies, also known as Frostbolt. I opened up a crafting and gathering page that actually looks decently interesting. I then took a look at my character sheet featuring all my gear and attributes, and apparently I already had some available talent points. And even though I chose to be an ice wizard, it seems I could still technically spec into fire or arcane. I stuck with the ice theme, however, and chose some further benefits to my ice spells. Afterwards, I clicked on the Raids button in the top right, and I was met with a black screen and some ominous music. Wait, is that a sub button? And a like button too? How convenient. I mean, why not? Right? It's in the game, guys. It's not me. Anyway, apparently there are 7 different raids available here. It looks like they might be on some sort of seasonal rotation, as it says there's only 2 months remaining in the Tempest Reach. This actually looks pretty awesome. There's a create as well as join raid button, so I'm not sure just how difficult it would be to actually get a group for this sort of thing. But it's definitely a nice interface, and it gives you a glimpse of some of the potential endgame content that you could get into in the future. And already, while this game was feeling like classic WoW Mobile in many ways, it was also exceeding my expectations. At this point, my curiosity had been thoroughly piqued. Anyway, I decided to stop standing around and start actually playing the game. I spoke with Adriel, and wow.
Nonsense, they adore my screeching.
Some somewhat decent voice acting. I was not expecting that. And the very first thing that you're actually taught to do is fish in the small pond beside you. There's no real trick to fishing, you just click on the water and when the bar fills up, you get your fish. As you can see on top of my action bar here, I had an interface which showed my fishing level and the XP required to get to the next level. I handed in the fish and made my way across the bridge to get into my first bit of actual combat. You can tab to target, right-click to auto-attack, or use one of your abilities. My spell did have a casting bar and it felt exactly like using Frostbolt in Classic WoW, but overall the combat was pretty standard. It didn't necessarily feel like anything unique or special, but it worked, and I've definitely seen worse, even already in today's video. I talked to Adriel again, and she gave me a new staff that apparently had a rune attached to it. I guess items and weapons will have specific runes, and these runes can actually grant you new abilities to use while you have the item equipped. The new staff granted me the ability Hoarfrost, which basically is an instant cast ice attack. Not bad. I continued following this NPC through the forest, fighting different groups of mobs.
Slay the trespasser!
Okay, so some of the voice acting is pretty good. Finally, I made my way to the end of this sort of mini tutorial, and I was surrounded by purple light when the ghost of Malik appeared. I'm assuming Malik is the main antagonist in this world, and I fought the ghost, which wasn't a complete cakewalk. I had to actually use a potion, but we got him down. And finally, I finished the tutorial and took a portal to Summer's Hollow. Here, you're placed into what seems to be a small sort of town or city. I talked to Adriel, who gave me a new belt, and told me to talk to some of the locals in town. At this point, you're sent on a bit of a dialogue-heavy quest chain where you talk to Rhoda, Chauncey, the town's stablemaster, and finally Hilda, which actually got me my first level. Level 2. I continued questing. I fought against some crazed actors in the backstage area of the town theater before speaking with this ghostly apparition. It's kind of nice though, you have a purple marker underneath your character that always points you in the right direction of your current quest. I got myself some new gloves, which actually looked kind of cool, before finally being sent out of town and into the Dagmar Strand, which is a zone for levels 2 to 4. And wow, I'm quite surprised at the openness and scale of the zone in front of me. I was expecting, due to the fact that this was and still is an older mobile game, that the zones would be quite small and compact. But this first open world zone that I was placed into really added a level of freedom to the feeling of playing the game that I was just not expecting. I fought some bees and wild boars in a field and truly felt like I was leveling in Elwyn Forest or Westfall. Where's Princess? How do I get to the Dead Mines? But in all seriousness, Villagers and Heroes has definitely hit something here. I'm compelled to keep playing this game. Like, even watching this back during the editing process has me wanting to pop open the game and start playing some more. Maybe it's my obvious Classic WoW bias shining through, and if anything even remotely looks or feels like Classic WoW, it creates an insatiable itch inside my mind that must be scratched. But genuinely, out of the many dead MMOs I've tried in this series, for some reason this game really has me wanting to come back and try it. I continued playing for a short while I took care of some giant frogs inside of a swamp, but honestly, I stopped myself because I think I'm gonna do a full video review on this mobile kind of Classic WoW one day. With that being said, Villagers and Heroes plays really well. Without being told, I wouldn't actually guess that it was also a mobile game. And on top of that, I want to play more, so because of all of that, I'm gonna go ahead and give this game an A, which, as some of you may know, is a pretty stunning review in this series. It's not often we find a game that goes beyond a B grading. Anyway, moving on. Next up, we have another very unique looking and sounding MMO. This is Heroes of Dire. Judging from the graphics I can see in the screenshots, it seems like they have that sort of super outlined Borderlands art style. The sort of cel-shaded comic book likeness, which has always looked super cool to me. Apparently, Heroes of Dire is an MMO tactical role-playing game, which features strategical turn-based combat. Really? Okay, we definitely need to see what's going on with this one. The reviews seem to be genuinely mostly positive, even though the review score on Steam is just mixed. Let's check it out. When first logging into Heroes of Dire, instead of any sort of character customization, you're just immediately placed into the tutorial. I'm not gonna lie, the music is actually pretty awesome. I'm a huge fan of medieval sort of tavern styles of music, and so far Heroes of Dire soundtrack kinda slaps. Basically, it's a turn-based strategy game that some of you may be familiar with. Personally, I've never really resonated with this style of combat. I even prefer the Pokemon or older Final Fantasy style of turn-based, but the ones that implement movement into your turn as well have never been too interesting to me personally. But let's give it a fair shake. So the green tiles indicate squares that you can move to. Your character can turn which direction they're facing by using these arrow keys in the bottom right corner. Keep in mind that you have to be facing whatever you want to actually attack. After a few moments, me and the skeletal mage finally got close enough to attack each other, and damn, I took out like half his HP and knocked him back. Anyway, I finished the tutorial and the game informed me that I would now be placed in World View, where I could decide what sort of battles I wanted to get into. The game also told me that I would now have a squad of characters to control instead of just the one, and I was also told to read the new player guide in order to avoid confusion. I'm told the game is much preferable to be played with friends as you get bonus XP for playing with others, and on top of that, you can have some pretty large battles, apparently up to 48 fighters at a time, in both PvE or PvP scenarios. Which sounds pretty awesome. If anyone was actually playing this game, I'd imagine some 24v24 strategic scenarios would be pretty intense and have some pretty clutch moments. But here we are in the world view. Your character is a sort of little chess piece, and there are green arrows indicating which direction you can move. There's also some mobs standing around me, which I could click on and get into one of those strategic turn-based battles with. As mentioned before, this time I have an actual squad with me. So my main guy, a ranger, and a healer. Now, because you're controlling each of these characters basically one at a time, plus the two enemies also get turns, it definitely feels like combat can take a really long time to actually complete. I mean, you're not even in striking distance of the enemy until you're about 5 moves in. This is sort of my main gripe with this kind of combat system, is that it's just so insanely slow paced. Imagine if you get into some of these even larger battles and you end up losing when you were right near the end of the fight. Having to go back and repeat that entire sequence just to hopefully get back to the same point in the fight and potentially win, I can imagine that loss would be pretty heart-wrenching. My ranger character was pretty nice to have, however, because he can basically attack the enemies from anywhere on the map. However, the closer I actually was to the enemy, the higher my accuracy would be. I took down the 2 orcs, and afterwards, Waydot, my main guy, was now level 2. I also received some new items as loot. You can equip, store, or scrap these items for silver. After every battle, your character will gain XP, you'll get some loot, and every once in a while, you'll actually get a new character which you can add to your squad. But while playing solo, you can only ever have a maximum party of 3, so the makeup of your squad can be pretty important. Anyway, I got into another fight, took down a couple more orcs. This time my ranger and healer both got to level 2, and I got some more equipment upgrades as well. But I feel like I was a little bit missing the point of this game and what I was really supposed to be doing. The game says it puts such a high priority on playing with others, so I had to see if I was actually the only person playing. I decided to take a look at some of the menus, and first off I opened the world map, which was quite a bit larger than I was expecting. And to be honest, similar to the actual graphics of the game, it seems really well designed. It's always interesting when some of these dead and older games actually artistically look really cool, unique, and crisp, because it's a bit sad knowing that someone put a lot of time and effort into making this game look a certain way, and unfortunately just not too many people are actually playing it and able to appreciate all the work. I took a look inside the chat system, which had plenty of filters like world, map, guild, market, but the only notifications were for me and things that I had done in the game. It didn't seem like anyone else was online talking or providing any other updates. I eventually also found a crafting page, and it seems like there's a huge crafting system with everything from masonry to inscription and even spell crafting. I would love to dive further into this and see what it's all about, but so far the game had really only introduced me to combat, and I didn't see quite where or how crafting was supposed to happen. But eventually, I stumbled upon the guild page. This is the page where you can find and potentially join other guilds in order to finally interact with some other players. There was only one problem though. It seemed like every guild available on this list had only one single member. I clicked on the first option in the list and it said the guild had some 2.4 million silvers saved up, but yeah, only one member. Upon further inspection, I saw the member was actually currently offline, and in fact it even said inactive in brackets. I'm assuming because he hasn't been online in quite some time. I looked at another 3 pages of guilds and every single one of them only had one member. So it seems like this game has had some activity in the past, and people have played the game to grind out at least the 25,000 silvers which was required to start your own guild, but afterwards there was no one else online to actually join their guild. This is such a strange one for me because on one hand I would never seriously enjoy this game in the long run simply because the combat is not for me. I'm not a big fan of strategical turn-based combat, but that doesn't mean that other people are not massive fans of that sort of combat system. And then the rest of the game, from graphical design to the user interface to even subtle details like sound design, are absolutely fantastic, and nothing like what I would expect from a game that has basically 0 players online. It's kind of unfortunate and a little bit sad. I urge you, if you're watching this video, to try out Heroes of Dire, especially if that sort of combat system intrigues you. I think this may be the first real time in the series that I've genuinely come across a game where I'm completely baffled at the fact that literally nobody else is online. It's completely out of the norm when it comes to an MMO style of game. I'm not even sure if it even falls into that category completely, even though it claims to be an MMO in the first sentence of its description on Steam. I'll go ahead and give it a B-. It could easily be a B+, but unfortunately, I think due to the fact that the game even suggests playing with others in order to make it more fun, that being online all by yourself actually takes away quite a lot of the experience. Anyway, moving on. Our fourth and final game of the day, released in 2014 by Hunted Cow Studios, boasting a mostly positive review section on Steam, Eldevin. Now, this looks like your pretty standard, more classical MMO. The trailer looks decent, and I think I've actually heard of this game before. In passing, at least. Let's jump into it.
Look at this dude. Wait till you see the... No.
Okay, character customization with this guy. I'm gonna be honest, these sort of graphics immediately hit me with some nostalgia. The original EverQuest was the first MMO I've ever played, and already this is very reminiscent of EverQuest in terms of graphics. To start off, you can customize your character with a body type, gender, hairstyle, etc. A giant dragon flapped in the background while I tried to choose between multiple extremely ugly appearance options. Like, what are we doing here? He looks like Professor Audenstein from the Ernest the Chicken Quest. Anyway, I was finally happy with my character's appearance. We had a relatively nondescript hairstyle with a slightly suggestive mustache. So I named myself Waydot and I was loaded into the tutorial, which apparently takes place 10 years in the future. You use WASD to move, and I was impressed with the very wide open and simple appearing user interface. My character sheet looked pretty good, a quest journal, an absolutely massive abilities menu, minimap in the top right, etc. I didn't really seem to have an action bar though, but maybe that comes later. I talked to Major Garrett as a giant broke through the door behind us and I was already being introduced to combat. Oh, there's my action bar, and some health and mana indicators as well. I was given an ability and just started one-shotting these gargoyles. They really stood no chance. While the combat definitely doesn't look or feel too amazing, it does do what it sets out to do. It's a tab target ability-based combat system. The animation leaves a lot to be desired, but we took down the giant and continued on. Oh, also, I got to level 2. Afterwards, I fought this infernal warlord and made quick work of him, and was told afterwards that I could apply attribute points in my character sheet. There is melee, ranged sorcery, vitality, energy, and focus. It appears Eldevin is not a class-based MMO, but instead you can use any of the styles of combat. And depending on your attributes, you can sort of specialize into those forms of combat. At first, I chose to mostly spec into melee and vitality, as I had a sword for now, but I ended up changing my mind a bit later. I made my way into the palace to watch this awesome cutscene, which probably would have taken at least 23 episodes in the Dragon Ball universe, but afterwards the tutorial was complete, and I was dropped into the present day. All my armor and abilities were gone, and my memory had been erased. Which is kind of interesting because in the beginning, didn't it mention that we were 10 years in the future? So I'm a little confused on the timeline right now, but let's see what's going on. I spoke to this priest who told me to continue forward to the captain in order to learn basic melee. I took a few swings at some combat dummies to impress the captain, and afterwards I was given a bow and taught to shoot some targets. Okay, I guess this is just the tutorial part 2. At this point, I leveled up and I was now level 3, which gave me 6 more attribute points. And because I liked using the bow so much, I decided to spec into range. Next, I went over to the magic tutor who taught me a spell which could heal myself. And afterwards, I was told to go towards the mage tower where I had a quest to enter an arcane portal. I was placed on a sort of blue island where I had to use magic to kill midgies. You know, as a short person, I'm slightly offended by that wording, but either way, I got myself to level 4. And completing this quest in the arcane portal actually rewarded me with some new gear. Some pants and some gloves that had some nice stats on them. And I continued questing. I was told to kill some beetles in this forest. The time to kill so far was extremely satisfying, as you basically just used tab to target an enemy, and then you pressed 1 to auto attack. And within about 1 to 1.5 seconds, the enemy would be dead. Afterwards, I killed a couple of wild pigs and finally was directed out of this sort of starting town and into a bit of the wild. I met Mandrake outside of this goblin cave where a couple dead guards laid on the ground. Mandrake informed me that the goblins took all his money and even his wife. Poor guy. So I was directed into the goblin cave to first retrieve Mandrake's supplies. I killed some of the goblins and the bats inside the cave, and I figured I would probably have to clear out the entire cave. I was about halfway through doing so when I realized that the room containing Mandrake's supplies was actually, literally, just right beside the entrance. Also, as I went back to Mandrake, I realized that basically everything that I had already killed had respawned. I finished that quest, which got me to level 5, and even though Mandrake had all his supplies, he now informed me that I also had to go save his wife, who would be on the 2nd level deeper inside this goblin cave. So I made my way back into the cave and eventually found a ladder leading to the 2nd layer of the dungeon. I found this guy's wife, but as it turns out, she's actually a huge bitch. She says she's not moving until Mandrake comes and saves her himself, this entitled piece of So I got back to Mandrake, who is still being a complete coward, and he gives me an amulet and a note to once again bring back to his wife in hopes that she will actually come with me this time. I'm pretty sure at this point I could just take his wife myself, but this is an MMO, and I'm trying to be a good guy. So I made my way back to his bitch wife. She says she's too afraid to leave because there's a hobgoblin boss below, in yet another layer of the dungeon. And she's afraid that if she tries to leave, he's gonna come get her. Now listen here, as someone who's already been in and out of this dungeon about 5 times with basically no issues, not to mention that there's a ladder right beside you, that makes absolutely no sense. But okay, let's go fight the hobgoblin boss. Now, the quest is actually labeled as a group quest, so I was expecting some sort of challenge here, but the hobgoblin boss was basically no more difficult than any of the other NPCs I had fought so far. He just had slightly more HP. Afterwards, instead of escaping with me, Mandrake's wife once again asks me to send Mandrake down to actually save her. He finally agrees and says he'll go down and save her. At this point, I was thoroughly annoyed with their failing relationship and all of the politics that came along with it. However, I was actually really starting to enjoy Eldevin. It's a super classic style of MMO with some more modern takes on things. For example, the questing is a bit more modern and easy to understand, with actually some decent writing and storytelling. The classless system seemed really compelling, and being able to play how you want to play is always a plus in my books. However, so far I hadn't seen a single other player, and even afterwards when I was exploring some of the city, I still didn't see any other players online. But so far everything I had done in the game was completely soloable, but I'm sure that's likely to change later on. Genuinely, I think there's probably a decent game hidden inside of this, and it's another one that I'll probably legitimately do a deep dive on in the future. If you guys can get past the somewhat subpar and outdated graphics, I would actually recommend giving Eldevin a try, especially if you're a fan of exploring some of these long-forgotten MMO worlds. With that being said, I don't think Eldevin can quite get to an A, but a B+ is still a highly generous rating in the series, and it's a game I plan to return to. Which of course means that we have a clear winner today. In fact, I think so far it's the highest rated game in this entire series. Villagers and Heroes. The classic WoW mobile simulator that was actually super fun and enticing to play, with decent combat, decent questing, and a nice looking, expansive world. Again, thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to use my link in the pinned comment or video description to receive the limited time bonus pack, including multiple premium vehicles, the exclusive decorator Eagle of Valor, 100,000 Silver Lions, and 7 days of premium. Anyway folks, I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who made it to the end of the video. If you guys liked the video, make sure to drop a like, comment, and potentially even sub. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider becoming a channel member. Anyways, I will catch you all in the next one. Later.